Hey NBA fans, do you remember the 1980s? The decade of excess. Big cars, big hair, big money. And for the NBA, it was the decade of the big revival. Magic and Larry brought the league back from the doom and gloom of the 1970s. Fans couldn't get enough of the West Coast Showtime Lakers versus the East Coast blue-collar Celtics. But little did anyone know that the party atmosphere of the NBA in the 1980s would give way to the most outrageous decade in NBA history. So buckle up, because we're about to take a thrilling trip down memory lane, revisiting the NBA's wildest moments of the 1990s. We probably should have known from the start that the 1990s were going to be a roller coaster ride of a decade in the NBA. After all, the decade opened with the second consecutive NBA title for the Detroit Pistons. The Bad Boys literally fought their way to 2 NBA titles by playing an over-the-top, physically punishing brand of defense that was called dirty everywhere outside of the state of Michigan. Hall of Fame coach Chuck Daly knew his squad, while talented, was more muscle than skill, so he masterminded a brilliant but brutal defensive scheme to make opponents think twice about taking the ball into the lane. Daly created what became known as the Jordan rules to slow down Michael Jordan. The plan was simple: double-team Michael Jordan every time he touched the ball. When Jordan escaped the double team and headed into the lane, send him to the deck by any means necessary. The Pistons had plenty of muscle ready to pounce. Rick Mahorn, John Salley, Dennis Rodman, and Bill Laimbeer were more than eager to clobber Michael Jordan. Detroit soon employed the same strategy against the entire league. Muscle was definitely a thing in the 1990s, and nobody exemplified this trait better than Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq stormed the league in 1992 when the Orlando Magic made him the #1 pick in the draft. He immediately made his presence known, brutalizing defenders and baskets alike. During a game in Phoenix, Shaq followed up a teammate's missed layup with a thunderous putback dunk that rocked the basket so violently that it nearly folded down to the ground. A few weeks later against the Nets, Magic forward Anthony Bowie drove to the basket and dished off to Shaq, who took one dribble before throwing down an emphatic two-handed slam that broke the basket and its entire support structure. Even the shot clock came crashing down and grazed O'Neal's back as he attempted to get out of the way. From that moment on, the NBA implemented a new policy to Shaq-proof baskets around the league. The backboards were made with more durable materials, and backup baskets were required to be ready to go at every arena. The 90s clearly were not a time for peace and love in the NBA. No rivalry captured the chaos and tension of 90s basketball quite like the Bulls and the Knicks. These Eastern Conference foes could not stand each other, and there was always trash talking and pushing and shoving whenever they met up. The intensity was always dialed up a few extra notches in the playoffs. Things came to a head during the 1994 Eastern Conference semifinals. The Knicks had taken a 2-0 series lead as they defeated a Bulls squad struggling to find the winning formula, as they were without Michael Jordan, who was a struggling Double-A outfielder at the time. More on that development later. The Bulls finally had some momentum as they built a 10-point lead with just under 3 minutes left until halftime of Game 3. That's when Knicks starting point guard Derek Harper and Bulls reserve JoJo English went toe-to-toe jawing at each other. Taunts escalated into shoving before Harper raised English up off the ground and tossed him into the first row of spectators. Players from both teams raced over to join the fracas. Stadium security swarmed in to attempt to break things up and restore order. As the chaos finally simmered down, television replays showed that NBA Commissioner David Stern had been sitting in the crowd with his wife mere feet from where Harper body-slammed English. Needless to say, players from both teams received hefty fines for their roles in a night the commissioner did not appreciate. The Knicks went on to the NBA Finals in 1994, where they met Hakeem Olajuwon and the Houston Rockets. The two teams swapped wins in the first 4 games of the series. Game 5 at Madison Square Garden would go down in history not for what transpired on the court, but for something that was occurring off the court, nearly 3,000 miles away on a Los Angeles freeway. With 6 minutes 39 seconds remaining in the second quarter, NBC cut away from its finals broadcast with live coverage of a breaking news story involving Hall of Fame football legend O.J. Simpson that would captivate the entire country. Just 5 days earlier, his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman had been brutally murdered in the doorway of her Brentwood, California home. Now, the Hall of Famer was in the back of a white Ford Bronco, driven by college teammate Al Cowlings, as Los Angeles police followed closely behind him. NBC quickly returned to the game, cutting away from only 42 seconds of game action. But as the slow-speed chase continued, the network decided, with the Knicks now leading 59-53 with 3 minutes 40 seconds left in the third quarter, to relegate its coverage of Game 5 into a box in the corner so it could show it simultaneously with the chase. While the NBA and its fans were miffed by the network's decision, it was later estimated that 95 million Americans watched the bizarre Simpson slow chase unfold on live TV in the pre-internet and smartphone era. Oh yeah, so getting back to Michael Jordan. While the Bulls were fighting with the Knicks, Michael Jordan was fighting with curveballs and sliders. On October 6, 1993, Jordan shocked the world by announcing he was retiring from the Bulls and that he was done with basketball. The stunning news sent shockwaves throughout the sports world. How could he do that? The Bulls were at the peak of their success, having won 3 consecutive NBA championships with another one practically a foregone conclusion. While speculation ran rampant, Jordan had his reasons for wanting out. Jordan's father, James, was senselessly murdered in the summer of 1993 as he rested in his car at the side of a North Carolina highway. James Jordan was a huge baseball fan and introduced his son to the game even before basketball. In February of 1994, Michael Jordan decided to use his newfound time off to take up a career in baseball. The Chicago White Sox signed Jordan to a minor league contract and assigned him to their AA affiliate, the Birmingham Barons. Under intense media scrutiny, Jordan managed to drive in 51 runs and steal 30 bases for the Barons. While everyone remembers his infamous .202 batting average, there were many in baseball who felt Jordan could have succeeded in time. World Series winning manager Terry Francona was Jordan's manager during his lone season in baseball. Francona said, "I do think with another 1,000 at-bats, he would have made it to the big leagues." Luckily for Bulls fans, Jordan decided to return to basketball in the spring of 1995 as the Major League Baseball strike continued on. Michael Jordan's absence opened the door to a new rivalry in the Eastern Conference. Jordan's old buddies, the New York Knicks, managed to eliminate the Indiana Pacers from the playoffs in both 1993 and 1994. Reggie Miller took it upon himself to make sure it did not happen again in 1995. Miller staged a one-man comeback for the ages in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, and it only took him 8.9 seconds to do it. In a back-and-forth game, the Knicks led 105-99 with 18.7 seconds remaining in the game. The home crowd at Madison Square Garden was ready to celebrate taking the first game of the series. Unfortunately for the New York crowd, Reggie Miller was not ready to concede victory. Miller scored 8 points in a ridiculous 8.9-second sequence that left the crowd and viewers around the country stunned. After a struggle to inbound the ball at half court, Mark Jackson found Miller on the left side at the three-point line. Miller immediately elevated over John Starks and sank the three to cut the lead to 3 points. On the ensuing inbounds, the Pacers pressed the Knicks, who had no timeouts remaining. Anthony Mason could not find an open teammate and tried to pass the ball to Greg Anthony right before a 5-second violation could be called. Unfortunately for the Knicks, Anthony got tangled up with an aggressive Reggie Miller and stumbled to the floor as Mason's pass was in the air. Miller intercepted the pass, took one dribble as he spun around back to the three-point line, and fired another three-point dagger to tie the game. After the shot dropped, Miller turned back and taunted Knicks superfan Spike Lee, whose front row seat was right near where Miller made the game-tying shot. The Pacers then carelessly fouled John Starks as the Knicks inbounded the ball. With a chance to regain the lead, Starks clanked both of his free throw attempts. The second missed free throw was batted around before Patrick Ewing reeled it in and attempted a quick putback that missed and was corralled in by, you guessed it, Reggie Miller. Anthony Mason was called for a foul on the play. Miller calmly nailed both free throw attempts to complete the miraculous comeback. After the game, a giddy Miller told an NBC sideline reporter, "John Starks choked, we came up big." Speaking of choking, no shocking NBA moments list of the 90s would be complete without mention of the infamous Latrell Sprewell incident. In early December 1997, the Golden State Warriors found themselves staring down a 1-14 start to their season. Fan favorites like Chris Mullin, Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Webber had all been dealt away by this time. New head coach PJ Carlesimo had previously coached the Portland Trail Blazers for 3 seasons, but had earned his reputation in the college ranks as a strict disciplinarian who wasn't shy about getting in his players' faces. Carlesimo's in-your-face style did not go over well with many players at the pro level. They felt that they were grown men, and Carlesimo treated them like kids. One player who had zero tolerance for the hard-charging coach was Latrell Sprewell. A reluctant star, Sprewell had a reputation for being extremely talented but moody and brooding. He'd even had a couple of physical altercations with former Warriors teammates Jerome Kersey and Byron Houston, but nothing quite like what occurred during that early December practice. As Sprewell and teammate Muggsy Bogues worked together on a passing drill, Carlesimo urged Sprewell to put a little mustard on his lethargic passes. Sprewell replied, "I don't want to hear it today." Carlesimo then approached Sprewell despite the player's warnings. "Don't come up on me, don't come up on me," he said. When Carlesimo kept walking toward him, Sprewell threatened to kill him and grabbed the coach by the throat, dragging him to the ground and choking him for 10 to 15 seconds before other players tore Sprewell away. About 20 minutes later, Sprewell returned while the team was scrimmaging. According to several Warriors players, he went after Carlesimo again and threw punches at the coach, connecting with one glancing blow before he could again be hauled away. Sprewell was originally handed the first season-long suspension in league history for the incident, but an arbitrator reduced the suspension to 68 games. In the end, Sprewell forfeited $24 million when the Warriors terminated his contract and would also lose his shoe deal with Converse. So there you have it. Brawls, broken baskets, infamous car chases interrupting the finals, teams choking, players choking coaches. The NBA in the 90s was a time that will never be forgotten.